Okay.
Okay.
Welcome back to the channel, Ben.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, you're becoming something of a regular guest on Edward King
Well,
Thompson.
it seems to be, yeah.
So, I think we're going to begin today's session with a very simple, but kind of very powerful question, which is, what are the scientific reasons that people believe in ghosts?
Well, it's a really good question, and I think it's quite a broad question as well. Because I think a lot of people will come to believe in ghosts, at least as to, speak of their experiences, is because they have had some sort of experience of their own. It tends to be not something, if you ask someone, do you believe in ghosts, they'll maybe entertain the possibility. But I think the more compelling cases is when you have someone, like yourself who has actually experienced something firsthand.
So they believe in it because they have experienced something that they cannot otherwise explain.
I think so, yeah. Because, for me, I haven't actually experienced anything. I'm open to the possibility that there is ghosts, but I haven't experienced anything myself, so I'm not as confident. I can't, put any of my own evidence towards that.
No, of course. And even that question can be dissected quite a bit because if you say do you believe in ghosts, that that question is very different for a scientist as it would be to just a layperson.
Oh, certainly,
in terms of you might say, yes, I believe that people see things that they cannot explain. But and that might be what we all refer to as a ghost.
Yes.
But it's not the same as saying you believe that necessarily the spirits of dead people come back to life.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good distinction to make, actually, I think, because for me anyway, as a scientist, like you said, I would say that I definitely believe in the brain and the biology of a person being able to make it appear that there are things that can't be explained, and it might be some very strange experiences, but I don't believe in the actual ability of a dead person's spirit to come back. I don't believe that because as a scientist, I suppose I don't believe in a spirit.
So and I think as well that there's this sort of perhaps misconception that a lot of unexplained things that happen, because the person who witnesses them sees something that to them is so inexplicable and so out of the norm that it must have a very extraordinary explanation as well. Yeah. But that probably isn't always the case either.
Yeah, I definitely think not, because I think there's a lot of factors that are at play there, because I think the example that I always go to is that if you had someone who was on some sort of psychedelic drug or something like this, and they see some crazy things on this, they would just obviously attribute that to the effects of the psychedelic.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the brain already has the components that, it has the neurochemicals that are very similar to psychedelics already, in the brain, and that the brain can hallucinate and fool you in ways that you aren't completely aware of because of the presence of these neurochemicals.
Yeah, so in a way, a lot of internal processes that are just going on within the mind are being misinterpreted as something external that's being perceived.
I think so, yeah. I think it's quite an interesting question of perception anyway, how much of we actually perceive of the world is actually, is it real? Well, of course it is real in the sense that I can touch this table because the table is there physically. But I think from a perspective of, if you line 100 people up and say, what color is this dress, for example, or there's another one, it's like an audio one, what is it called? I think it's Yanni Laurel. Have you heard that one before? Where it's
audio
two audios at different, I think it's different frequencies, laid on top of each other, and based on, so both audios are there to be heard, but different people will hear different audios just on depending on what their brain is filtering out. So I think it's an interesting thing of how, even though the stimulus is there to be perceived,
it's the same stimulus. It's just the tools that are perceiving it may do so in a very, very different way.
Certainly, yeah, and even then, when you add on top of that the fact that this specific environmental situation that someone's in, are they sleep deprived, or are they under some sort of stress, and all of these will affect sort of the functioning of the brain, and how well it is in its ability to kind of perceive the sort of reality, and I think, especially in a sleep deprived state, you're very highly suggestible as well to different things, and you're maybe expecting to see things that are there when they're not in fact there.
And there are also like quite a number of external factors in the environment, not just like the brain's own state, but other things that are going to influence it as well, right? I suppose infrasound would be one.
That's a good one, yeah.
Because I think the thing about infrasound is that.
Do we want to like define it in case anyone?
Yeah,
doesn't know?
yeah. I think. So, well, I'll leave you to.
I think so. My understanding of infrasound is the human hearing range is about sort of 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and infrasound is anything that is lower than 20 hertz, really. So, for example, the example I always think of is sort of like electrical, like signals, like cables and things like that are in houses. They are making noise. It's just almost imperceptible to humans.
It's our hardware isn't equipped to hear
it's
it,
not.
basically.
But however, other animals would be able to hear that, which is a good. I always like to. I think I'm maybe biased in this because I am a biologist. I'm very interested in other sort of animals' experiences of the world, but I think it's a very useful tool to use to sort of parse out the kind of different sort of realities that are existing in the same world. Because we as humans can't perceive that a cat or a dog might be able to perceive that, and I think that can explain a lot of the times when people say like their cat is seeing ghosts.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that.
It's something like this, that they are perceiving a different reality essentially because of their, like you said, hardware is different to ours,
and we assume that something that another animal, say a pet, can perceive, but that we can't, means that it must be invisible, or it must be using some sort of mystical, magical technology to disappear from us. Definitely. So,
back to infrasound, I suppose. I think that I'd like to hear your sort of experience on this, but I think it's probably quite a common factor in terms of explaining sort of paranormal or sort of unexplainable experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it is about infrasound is that in its name, I mean, it's called sound. So we assume that to mean something that like information that you pick up with your ears, but actually it's very misleading, because the whole idea of it is that your body is like your senses are picking up on the sound, but the information that the way it's affecting you is not like by hearing something. You're potentially like seeing a hallucination, or feeling very unsettled and unnerved. And I think it definitely could explain a large portion of those situations where you enter a new building and you think the atmosphere is just off, or that classic, you feel like you're being watched.
That sort of like feeling of there being a presence there. I think because what I've read about infrasound is that it can cause sort of vibrations, as all sound is, just vibrations, but it's not able to be perceived by your ears, but the rest of your body can feel that, and I suppose that's what you're alluding to in terms of like that sort of the physical sensation of the atmosphere being sort of in fact, I actually read something where it was that the infrasound could vibrate the eye as well, and like cause physical hallucinations as well. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah. I
In
think
terms
so,
of
yeah.
like because it's affecting the actual eye itself, it's causing like a
visual
change.
hallucinations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There is a case in, I believe it's Hampton Court Palace, in England, where of course King Henry VIII lived for part of his life. And there's a section of hallway right in the center of the building, has like no windows, so it already feels like kind of this kind of isolated, kind of strange like landscape.
Yeah.
And there was known to be infrasound in one of the walls. I don't know, it's because like some plumbing ran through there, or wiring or whatever, but many people have reported seeing the ghost of one of King Henry VIII's former wives. I'm not sure which of the 6 it was. One of the ones that didn't survive.
I can never remember.
Neither. But for like many years, people have reported seeing her in that corridor.
Right. Okay,
and it was then discovered. I believe there's an episode of Uncanny with Danny Robbins where he went there.
Oh, really? Yeah.
With Kieran O'Keefe, the resident skeptic, and they did detect very high levels of infrasound there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
And probably of EMF as well, which is another similar like invisible thing that can cause hallucinations. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a great example of how like actually a historical haunting was able to be explained by the presence of this kind of invisible but very real phenomenon.
Yeah.
Very tangible phenomenon that was occurring there. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Speaking of buildings, actually, as well, and another sort of thing that can cause hallucinations is carbon monoxide as well, because obviously it's an odorless, colorless gas, which is commonly, comes out of boilers which are misfunctioning and things like that. Very common in houses, and in high levels it can cause death in people, and it has, you hear a lot of tragic cases, and obviously that's why we have carbon monoxide detectors now. But I think even at a very low dose, or a very low level, I should say, it isn't actually can not be detected by carbon monoxide detectors, especially if it's not in the room where it is. And at that very low level, it won't necessarily kill you, quickly, but it will still cause the sort of the deoxygenation of like your brain, and
it is poisoning you essentially.
It is essentially slowly poisoning you. But it's that effect on the brain that we're interested in terms of causing hallucinations, because like any way that the brain is not oxygenated enough, then it's not going to be functioning properly, and can cause hallucinations. It's the same thing happens with when you're like lack of sleep would be the same sort of thing,
so where you're not, your brain can't get enough oxygen.
Exactly.
And there is a running theme here with all of these skeptical explanations, where it is something, a very tangible and real and well understood force, but it is just undetectable to the human senses, basically.
That's exactly it. I think it's these things that are causing changes in our perception, but we aren't able to detect them. That our perception is being changed just very subtly, without our knowledge. So I think it's very interesting.
So with like that in mind, if you had to put like a rough number on it, like what percentage do you think of paranormal sightings and accounts can be explained by something that is already well understood by science?
I mean, I don't want to.
I've kind of put you on the spot here, to be honest.
I don't want to say like 100%, but I would certainly say in the high 90%. I would say, of course, there'll be cases where you don't have enough, context to it. If it's someone telling you about something, it might be even just in the way that they're communicating it to you, may be biased. In terms of a video, you may just not have context. It can very easily be faked in terms of video. So I think you're definitely looking at like a very small, like maybe 1 or 2% of cases that maybe can't be explained by conventional
science.
By science at its current stage.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And it's funny because the kind of paranormal field feels so massive.
It does, yeah.
But so much really of paranormal research should be about like kind of sifting the wheat from the chaff. Exactly,
I agree,
essentially.
Yeah.
And yeah, but are there certain things that you've read or certain cases perhaps that you've looked at yourself that even would stump you and that you can't immediately jump to an existing explanation?
I'm trying to think if anything comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably ask you if there is anything that you comes to mind, and I will try and give my perspective on it, because nothing's coming to mind for me.
I haven't got like one case in particular. Well, I can think of something I might come to later. But I think there's certain elements of like specific cases that kind of perk my ears up a bit.
Right,
and it's interesting. It's whenever, I guess whenever you look at it broadly and using Occam's razor, it almost seemed the events are so extraordinary, have been seen by so many people, and are so consistent in some cases with like the history of the area, that you almost get to a stage where it's more effort to explain it using conventional means than it is to just say there's something going on here which we fundamentally don't understand.
Yes, yeah.
And it is like opening a door into parts of the universe, parts of maybe elements of quantum physics that we simply like don't understand yet. I think every so often you do get that feeling. You know?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. You know, there will always be things that are just beyond our reach in terms of understanding at our current moment. And I think just in general, science is about sort of, we do look for, you know, the most parsimonious explanation, the simplest explanation for things, like you said, using Occam's razor. But at the same time, we wouldn't be doing science well if we were just taking the easiest route to go. We have to explore all possible explanations and even maybe then come back to the simplest explanation.
Exactly. Once
done
you've
that wide scope.
And
you know, even in terms of you saying, you know, the consistency of the fact that so many people have seen it, I would almost, from a scientific perspective, I would say that that's quite a decent, you know, sample size then, in terms of like, if there was some sort of underlying scientific explanation for it, that would be quite consistent with, you know, with there being a scientific explanation, because so many people have seen it, and it's affecting them in the same way.
In the same way that it suggests that there is something external going on.
Oh, definitely.
Whether it's like paranormal.
I think that's probably the middle ground to come to. There is that there's, you know, with consistent experiences like that at a specific point, it's more likely to be something external rather than like an internal, you know, individual kind of thing going on.
And almost that is the crux of the argument, really, is like, is what is being seen internal or external in a way? Because we often again have this loaded question of like, do you believe in ghosts? And it's like, well, what do you really mean like by ghosts? I'm beginning to sound like Jordan Peterson here.
What
you mean by ghosts?
What do you mean by believe? What do you mean by ghost? What do you mean by like in?
But I think both the camp, let's go to the extreme believer who believes that ghosts are the spirits of the deceased come back to life and inhabiting the same space and time as them.
Yeah.
However many rules of physics that would break.
Quite a couple.
So let's take that extreme, and then let's take the other extreme, the extreme skeptic who believes everything is just a misinterpreted phenomenon from the brain, or something that's being generated internal, projected externally. They can both agree that people see ghosts.
Yes.
And that is important.
Yes.
And that is interesting. It tells us something about humanity.
Yes.
Regardless of what they are, right?
Definitely, yeah. I think you've made a very good point, because whether, you know, it's almost depends on sort of your what sort of lens you're taking to that, because, you know, whether you're interested in like is there actually something that everyone is seeing that's unexplainable? Then you can take that, like you said, there is something going on where people are seeing this because of an internal factor, and that's just something to do with like human biology or human perception. And then if there's something external causing them to see that, then again that could be something like infrasound. It's because of the internal biology of the human that we are perceiving it in that specific way. So that's sort of an external factor causing an internal change. But if your question is more focused on, well, is there actually something like the spirits of dead people, I think that while you can offer a scientific explanation for it, I think it sort of goes beyond the realms of science, because at the end of the day, science is really just there. It's not really there to... A lot of people think that it's to explain things. I don't really think of it like that. I think of it's more just there to sort of describe things and predict. So, that's sort of the power of science, is if you can describe this rule of something, then you can use that to predict something else.
Yeah, I think I've watched an Alex O'Connor discussion recently, where he's discussing something similar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was the episode with Hank Green or the one with Vsauce. It's one of the two. I watched them both simultaneously, but it is this almost making a very similar point.
Because I haven't actually seen that video.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. It is very interesting, but they're talking about kind of like peeling back the layers of the onion. It's just as time goes on, it's like you haven't explained something fundamentally.
Yeah.
You're just able to describe it in more detail.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I think that's a good analysis of it, because I think, because if you think about it, like if you're trying to get to the core, if you're saying that an explanation is essentially you just asking why until it ends at some point, then I don't think that science can ever really do that, because all that science can really do is you sort of have a bunch of questions at this current point in time, and you sort of just pick one and you kind of go in a direction to describe it in lots of detail. Especially, that's definitely true in biology. Physics is maybe a bit different, because they're trying to come closer to an approximation of what is at the very bottom of that, whereas biology is more interested in just describing the world and using that to kind of predict different things, because I mean, I use explain as a sort of shorthand. I would say that like a lot of animal behavior can be explained by genetics, or can be explained by evolutionary natural selection, things
because that's the word that makes sense in an everyday discussion. If you're not,
because
breaking it down
at a approximate level, at a level that we are interested in, it is explaining it, but it's not explaining at the very bottom. And it's the same with ghosts. Like we're explaining why it's science is explaining sort of why it's occurring to our senses, but it's not explaining sort of the deeper meaning of that. Like are we actually seeing the spirits of dead people, or is it just they're just nothing there? I think. Yeah, and I think that's maybe where science can't explain it quite yet.
No, not yet. Like even if you are seeing a hallucination of someone, I don't know, say like a dead relative who passed away 20 years ago, like what does it fundamentally mean to like just see them walk into the room in front of you? What does that tell you about yourself?
Yeah,
about your connection to your ancestors,
Yeah, that's very true.
And often these hallucinations are far more vivid than our imagination can even conjure up.
Yeah.
And it's that idea of, I guess, parts of the brain that aren't functioning all the time.
Yeah, because I think you're right that we don't really have access to most of what our brain is doing at any given time. A good way to think about it is when you learn to do something very routine, like when you learn to drive or something, or learn to, tie your shoelaces. A lot of the time, consciously, like your inner sort of, consciousness, like you are thinking about something completely different, but the motor functions of your of your brain are still controlling you to do these things without, and you're on complete autopilot, as people like to say, which is essentially what it is. You're not accessing that in your brain. It's just packaged away into a background process.
It's
I think
subconscious process.
Yeah, and I think when people see this really vivid hallucination of someone and they're like, wow, like I haven't seen that person in so long, and it's such a vivid recollection, and I think people are maybe surprised by that, but at the same time you have no idea what your brain is capable of and what kind of information your brain has stored away that you just don't have access to.
For sure. And one of the most interesting things about seeing a vivid hallucination that maybe is misinterpreted as an apparition is that it potentially will follow the rules of the physical reality around you. So it might go through a doorway or it might walk up the stairs. And those things, again, are there. They are real for all the everyday intents and purposes that we need them to be real. Again, back to that thing of, is the table really the table?
We can move past that. So you get into a real, and it's I'm not a philosopher.
No,
so
we can agree for the purposes of this discussion.
For the utility of just having a discussion that things like the table are real. Don't think we have to question that.
No. Yeah, but so let's use an actual example that I've been investigating recently.
Yes, interesting.
Talking about the idea of could it be a hallucination, I guess. So recently at a hotel I've been investigating in Oxfordshire, 3 separate members of staff have independently reported seeing this little girl in period clothing with blonde hair who looks about 10 years old.
Okay.
And by all accounts, each and every person who has seen her describe her as looking like a real physical person. And I did kind of think, at what point can you rule out a hallucination? Because if they're all seeing her and describing her with blonde shoulder-length hair and wearing a dress, how is it possible that can independently happen to 3 people? I suppose the only thing that comes to my mind, playing devil's advocate instantly, is that perhaps they have spoken with each other before recounting the story to me, and that certain details from one account have kind of merged into the other account, because people do have very selective memories and actually do invent memories as well.
Certainly, yeah.
And I think something that's fundamental to being alive, and is possibly even a knock-on effect of natural selection and evolution, is this ability to tell stories. How a fundamental everyday part of our life and enjoyment of living is telling stories.
Definitely, yeah.
And I suppose that's the only logical explanation I can find, is that somehow they've taken aspects of each of their experiences and they've kind of merged into this one character.
Yeah, so I'll ask you about some more context in a second, but a couple of things jump to mind for me. The first would be sort of, when you think of a ghost that you're going to see, you might expect to see something like someone in period clothing, because you wouldn't expect to see someone maybe in more modern clothing, like in a hoodie or something like that. You're going to expect to see some sort of kind of Victorian type, because that's a lot of what the ghost stories that we read. So we've already primed our brain to kind of expect those kind of things.
Certainly in pop culture. Yeah.
Exactly. And then when you say, about sort of that selective memory thing, I think that's very right. That we really just, our brain is, in terms of natural selection, when you think about it, all that we're really interested in is, if we go into a forest and, we're looking for food and, we come across sort of a, there's a path going this way and there's a path going that way. The path going on the right, maybe is leading to food, and the path on the left is leading to something completely different. But what we're going to go back and tell the rest of sort of the tribe is that, well, the path on the right, leads to food, and we're not going to really remember in as much detail. Like, it might be like, oh, you go down the path on the right and you take the first right, and then it's on the tree, like beside the bush, and it's like, that's the important information in terms of what our brain is seeking. So in terms of sort of having a selective memory, if you've asked them about, have you seen, like, describe what you've seen, then they're going to describe the sort of things that they think are the most interesting about that.
Exactly.
And they're going to sort of remove the sort of other context from that as well.
The parts that are the most important to the overarching narrative.
Exactly, yeah.
That allow it to slot into a jigsaw, because
definitely,
I guess, again, part of the fundamental survival instinct is being able to make sense of your environment.
Exactly.
And come to a concrete conclusion about what you're perceiving. Right?
Yeah, so. I agree. Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor as well, is that, our brain is constantly trying to sort of make sense of the environment. Like, if you don't see something that, you can't immediately explain, your brain is probably going to be trying to tack on some sort of like post hoc explanation to that, like, oh, well, that's, it kind of looked like this, or maybe it was because of that, it's something like that, rather than just, oh, I don't know what that was. Like, I think your brain is just always trying to fit it into some sort of context.
Yeah. Like, say we are to take a case where 3 independent witnesses all like have evidence, and they've all seen something that looks exactly the same. It also matches the history of the area.
Yes.
Let's say hypothetically they didn't know the history as well. Someone's like got a photo of the girl on camera that matches all their descriptions. Like,
yes.
Like, what is there kind of, going back to what I was talking about earlier about that Occam's razor, like, where would you say the threshold is that it becomes more likely that it's something totally inexplicable than to something that's already pre-understood? Like, what would you as a biologist and a scientist have to see to be stumped, or to conclude that it's something outside current scientific understanding?
I think for me, I'm very much a person who I need to see it for myself. I think a lot of people are like that. I think I would have to be convinced by seeing it myself, and then even then I'm not sure if I would like believe my own sort of perception of it, because I think maybe there could be something where just there's something about that area that it causes some sort of perception, or even just the kind of if it is happening in the same place, it could be something where there's some sort of external factor. Okay. But that would be, I think, pretty close, to be honest, in that evidence. Like, it's pretty close to not being able to explain it. I think
it is the consistency, really, isn't it?
It is
across the eyewitness accounts, and maybe some physical evidence and some historical. Because
if you think about it in terms of, like, evidence in like a court of law, like once you get multiple pieces of evidence that stack up and all align, that that's looking like a very convincing case that you could put forward, and that it would probably be quite strong in like a court, because you're looking for coinciding evidence, essentially. It's the same in science, but I think I would be probably quite convinced by that without actually having seen it myself, I think.
And I've got one last main question for you. In the 21st century, where kind of many of our myths and legends have gone from being something that people believed in the everyday to exist and be part of reality, and they've kind of been now relegated to the storybooks, the history books, like, say, witchcraft and vampires and goblins and fairies, etc. Yes. Why do ghosts persist to this day, do you think?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's probably something, from my perspective anyway, it's probably something to do with the sort of closeness to people. I think it's that thing of, well, people like to believe in ghosts because they like to believe that there is something after death for humans, whereas the other sort of goblins and fairies and things like that, they're other creatures. They're not human, and they're not, them existing or them not existing doesn't really have any sort of importance on human experience
Sure.
directly, other than just they're there. And I think probably it is something to do with people like to believe that there is something, or that they can see their dead relative, or that there is this place is haunted because some sort of emotional event happened in the past, or some sort of traumatic event happened here. And I think people like to believe because, like you said before, people just like to believe in stories, especially about other humans. And I think people really like that element of history.
Yeah, and paradoxically, actually, it's people find comfort in the idea of ghosts existing. I mean, we often associate them with being frightening, and sure, an experience itself can be very frightening and unnerving, but it tells us that perhaps death isn't the end, and there's a way to continue going on, especially if you're not even a religious person. It gives you that gateway, the root of it, that escape plan.
Yeah, I think that's probably the root of it. Is just a lot of people want to sort of believe, whether it's in a religious capacity or some sort of other capacity, that some part of them will live beyond their physical body, and I think that ghosts probably give that to a lot of people. I think it is comforting.
Absolutely. We've got stakes in the game. We've got chips in it.
Yeah, we're
invested. So obviously, what we've discussed today are many of the scientific and logical, rational explanations for why people believe in and see ghosts. But despite the high percentage that you named, and despite how many different ways there are to explain paranormal phenomenon, do you think it's still important to fully investigate claims and cases of paranormal activity?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think because there's always an element of sort of science, which is exploration, especially into things that aren't already established as something to investigate. I think a lot of the best sort of discoveries happen when you go outside of that. Absolutely. And I think that probably one of the biggest unexplained things currently is why do so many people see ghosts? And I think it's a very valuable thing to investigate, because it could lead anywhere, really.
Definitely.
It's something that it could lead even in a different direction to we even comprehend.
That's it. I think we were having a little bit of a discussion off camera before this started, but I think we were talking about how what we label as ghosts today is so heavily influenced by, say, Christianity, and the kind of revival of the spiritualist movement in the 19th and 20th centuries. And I think there's always a revived interest after a large global period of trauma. So if you look at after the First and Second World Wars, obviously the COVID pandemic, I think it's really clear how much more interested people are in their history and in folklore and legend, etc. So I think, and it's one of the reasons I started this channel was to investigate and probe further. And like you said, we might end up somewhere that is nothing to do with the spirits of dead people, but something that we can't even imagine yet.
I think that's the most exciting thing for me anyway, is going to somewhere where you haven't even thought of. I think that's much more interesting in the limits of our where we think we can go, and then going beyond that.
Absolutely.
So
well, I guess we'll see what happens.
I'll be here to find out anyway.
Do you have any closing words? Any thoughts for the channel?
No, just that it's really been a pleasure speaking to you. It's a topic that I watch your channel, obviously, because I'm very interested, despite my skepticism, despite, my sort of scientific thinking, or at least I like to think that that's how I approach the world. I'm still very interested in sort of these unexplained phenomena because, like I said, I think that by exploring things like this, we, will probably uncover things that we didn't even think that we could, and I just it fascinates me really. I think it's that the sort of unknown capacity. I think it's the same thing that drives me in science as well, is just trying to understand things that we don't know yet. And I think it's the same thing about sort of the paranormal and myths and things like that. I just like to understand sort of the unknown.
I couldn't have put it better myself, and I feel likewise. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Yes.
And we'll definitely have to do it again sometime in the near future. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.